Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, publisher of Walls and Ceilings, a roofing contractor and building enclosure. Art Eisner, the editor of Roofing Contractor, and I are honored to be here today with Trent Cotney, CEO of Cotney Construction Law. Trent, thank you for joining us. You're always so generous with your time, and we appreciate it so much. And I know everyone knows that Trent is one of the leading legal experts in the roofing industry, but also represents a lot of contractors in all the construction trades. And like I said, Trent, thank you so much for always being so gracious with your time. But, you know, as we dive in, I mean, it's been another rough week in terms of spiking with COVID-19 cases in states with really large roofing and construction markets like Arizona and Texas, and actually right there in Florida, Trent, where you are. So can you fill us in? I mean, what are you hearing from contractors this week?
Sure. Jill, Art, it's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy talking to you guys. So it's been crazy, and you and I were talking about it before we got on here, but, our phones are busy. We have had so many phone calls with contractors concerned about crew and office staff that have come down with COVID, what to do, how to go about handling it. For those states that you mentioned, primarily Arizona, Texas, we've seen a big uptick in California. Florida definitely. I'm trying to think where else. We've had a few here or there. Nashville's spiked. It's caught a lot of contractors by surprise because I think everyone thought that we were over the worst, and now we're sort of reversing course, and it's tough. It's tough to have to deal with these things mentally, the stress that it causes, both the owners and the employees. And the biggest issues that we've been dealing with now is just making sure people understand what the guidelines are out there and how to make sure that you're being safe and that you're taking precautions to make sure that you're not spreading COVID to even more employees. So I'll give you some great examples of phone calls that we received just yesterday. So classic example is a crew member comes down with the symptoms, okay, headache, fever, okay. Employer sends that person home. And the question we get is, well, Trent, what do we do? What's the protocol there? And what I always tell them is I say, you want to look at two things, really. You want to look at duration and you want to look at proximity. Okay. So duration, what do I mean by that? The duration of exposure. And CDC and OSHA have been all over the place. First they said 30 minutes, then 10 minutes. Now CDC as of June has said 15 minutes exposure. The next is proximity. Did you get within 6 feet of them? Okay, if you check those boxes, then anybody that had that kind of contact or potential contact with the person that may be infected, you want to tell them, you want to say, look, we have noticed that you may have been around someone that's been infected. Now, here's something I want to hit home for our listeners, okay? For any contractor that's listening to this, be careful. Be very careful about telling people too much information, okay? The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, allows you to ask people questions about, have you been exposed to somebody with COVID? Do you have a fever? That kind of stuff. But you got to keep that stuff confidential, okay? So you can't say John Smith has COVID and send an email out firm-wide, okay? You can't do that, okay? The best way to go about doing it, what we always tell customers is, look, tell them that you have been in contact with somebody that we have identified may have COVID. They have not tested positive yet, but here's what we know. Take adequate precautions. If you believe you have symptoms or anything else, please notify us immediately, quarantine yourself, so on and so forth. The other thing that you really want to do is if you're taking mandatory temperature checks, like a lot of contractors have initiated that, even in the non-spiking areas, okay? You want to try to do that as private as you can. You don't want to have a group of people sitting around all looking at the results going, because then you may end up in a potential situation where you are violating the ADA if you get that confidential information out. As you can see, there's a lot of different things to worry about. It's hard enough for a roofing contractor or anybody in, doing walls and ceilings or anything along those lines to just make a living. But now you've got to basically be a physician and a lawyer and an HR rep all in one, and it's very difficult.
Trent, do those same privacy protections also appear in the OSHA guidelines related to COVID reporting? Do they account for that, or do they purposely stay away from that?
So the OSHA guidelines don't have anything to do with privacy. They don't really talk about that. And, you know, there's been a lot of consternation with OSHA as far as the stances they've taken with COVID right now. The unions and a lot of safety professionals have said we need more stringent guidelines. We need some help. We need some understanding. From a contractor's standpoint, anything that is not 100% from made into a rule is just that, it's a guideline. Okay, so there's a question as to whether or not it's enforceable. The issue is we can't figure out what's going on. And I'm just being honest with you. You know, I watch the news, and it doesn't matter what news channel I'm watching. I hear different things every single day. We don't know what's going on. So how can we expect our government regulatory agencies to know what's going on? So the CDC and OSHA are primarily concerned about engaging in proper hygiene, making sure that you're social distancing, doing the kinds of things to protect yourself from potential exposure. OSHA does go into a little bit of more robust detail if you're in a situation where you are absolutely 100% certain you're going to be exposed. You might want to, you know, engage in more robust PPE than just using a typical, you know, cloth mask or face covering, something along those lines. But privacy is in the realm of the ADA. Okay, that's the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's what primarily governs those types of HR related issues, if that makes sense.
Okay, you're now in a mandatory mask area. You co-authored a piece last week on roofingcontractor.com that really talks about mask requirements in construction that I'd really encourage everyone to take a look at. And like everything else, that's been a fluid situation for you to monitor. Can you talk about some of the highlights and what you incorporated into that piece?
Yeah, and let me tell listeners something that caused me enough concern to get on social media real quick on was it Friday? Yeah, it was Friday. We have gotten we during this time of the year, we normally get 1 to 2 phone calls a week from employers that have had employees that are suffering from heat exhaustion, heat stroke, heat injury related illnesses. You know, here in Florida, we've had our heat index has been over 100 almost every single day. So it's a lot. Okay. And my concern is last week alone, we had 11 phone calls that, you know, 2 normal, 11, there's a problem. So anytime that our team sees that, our OSHA team, our safety team, we start asking ourselves, why is this? Why do we have these problems? And what we kind of surmised, and again, this is just us kind of thinking, is that in these places that require mandatory masks, there's a lot of crew people that are wearing these masks. They may not be the proper type of mask. They may not be breathable. They're increasing the ambient heat that's blown back in your face. And here's one thing that I've seen firsthand when I've gone out to job sites is if you're required to wear a mask, you're less likely to take in water, okay? And a lot of contractors, because of concerns about COVID-19, have eliminated some communal water stations, the communal water cooler. They switched to water bottles. So whether it's intentional or unintentional, the crew aren't hydrating enough, okay? And I really want to hit this home. You know, mandatory hydration breaks are critical. It doesn't matter whether you are in, you know, Idaho or Florida, you got to mandate that, and your people out there need to be able to do it. So with regard to the mask versus OSHA, okay, there's a big difference between a mandatory mask, which can be, you know, as simple as a cloth covering or a gaiter or whatever you want to cover your face, and PPE, okay? Personal protective equipment, things like N95 masks or respirators are things that are designated by OSHA for purposes of ensuring that you're not inhaling certain types of substances, and they regulate your breathing appropriately. So there are certain instances where PPP are always called out, okay? Good example is silica use, you know, if you're surrounded by that, those kinds of situations. If you are in areas that you may encounter hazardous or toxic fumes, clearly that's needed. But a lot of times what we have is we have crew members, I've seen it here in Florida, where they're wearing masks because they're told to wear masks and they're close enough to each other to wear masks. They get up on the roof and they wear a mask, and that mask might be dangerous. So here's a very interesting legal question I got. And this is a tough one for me. And to be honest, I give it my best shot, but here is the question. Question was, if I am faced with having to wear a mandatory mask in a jurisdiction that requires that, or if I should be more concerned about heat what should I choose and how should I go about doing that? It's a tough question, right? Okay, because you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. What I always say is I recognize heat as a killer. Okay, it is an absolute killer in a lot of the places where we see roofing contractors do work, or any contractor. So I would always err on the side of making sure that you're staying properly hydrated. If it makes sense to continue wearing a mask, you should do it. You should maintain social distancing. You should try to be as compliant as you can, for both COVID and heat related issues. But very interesting times we're in right now. And I think that is causing some of the frustration with OSHA, because we're left to sort of our own devices to figure out, which is the worst of the two. Very interesting.
It sounds like, much like a lot of this crisis, the feds are really pushing a lot of the onus for implementing restrictions and regulations on the states independently. So where can contractors kind of find some guidance on what they need to do?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a lot of politics. We are an election cycle, so there's a lot of finger pointing. Nobody wants to take the blame for choosing the wrong path. We kind of see that a little bit here with our governor here in Florida. We're spiking like crazy, and he's set down a certain course, and politically, it's difficult if you change course. So, the best place to local county or city's website. It's usually right on the front page. We also have a pretty decent database on our main site, cottonyseal.com, that kind of goes through some of the different guidelines. There's also some cumulative type things depending on what state you're in, and that provides a link that kind of goes, here's what it is in each city or each county, depending on where it is. The places that are spiking are the ones that generally there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have some kind of mandatory mask rule.
Let's talk about the non-spiking states or in areas where things aren't so dire or appearing right now. Are you hearing different concerns from contractors over there, or is it more of the same?
So it's different concerns. I would say in the states up north, some Pacific Northwest, Midwest, there are still the occasional calls where employees have COVID or they have symptoms that are similar to that. But I think the concern that I'm hearing out of contractors is, when is it coming, right? When are we going to get ours? They're getting reasons. People are going to bars, they're doing this, they're doing that. I don't know. I don't think anybody's really said this is exactly why these states are spiking. So I think that if I were a contractor in a state that's not spiking, I would prepare for the worst. Okay, I'll give you a great example. Okay, this is just me personally. I'm talking to my wife last night, and I said, they're going to shut this whole place down. I better go get another haircut because I don't want to go another 3 months without a haircut. But the same kind of guidance should go for a contractor. So remember back to March. I remember what happened. Whatever happened then, get your ducks in a row, right? Go talk to your suppliers, get your supplies, get your vendors, make sure your technology is where it needs to be, just to assume it's going to shut down again. Okay, and if it doesn't, then you're well prepared.
Got it. It's worth asking if there have been any updates on the Supreme Court's DACA decision or the COVID-19 stimulus package we've talked about before. Anything new you're hearing worth we're talking about?
Yeah, a couple of things on DACA. The fact that the Supreme Court made that decision, and we talked about it last week, that Trump's going to take some action against that. It still leaves DACA holders in the lurch because it was a temporary stopgap program. So we still need a permanent fix, and that's one of the things. When I go to things like Roofing Day, or I'm advocating for these kinds of changes. We need to come up as an industry, regardless of what trade or profession you're in. As an industry, we've got to come up with a way to get legal immigration, okay? Because the jobs aren't here. They will never be here. That is the message that politicians don't understand. So even though DACA is still around, it's still not a great solution. It's a temporary fix to a problem that needs to be addressed. With the PPP, something real interesting that came out, I was talking to our corporate and finance group yesterday, and it didn't dawn on me when I saw it the first time, but then as we started talking about it, I was like, wow, that's big. So the SBA and the Department of Treasury, they came out and they said, we are going to publish on our website or some website the recipients of the PPP loans, anybody that's gotten over 150,000 or more. And here's what we're going to publish: the business name, the type of business, your number of jobs supported, and they're going to have brackets for the amounts that you receive. So 150,000 to 350,000, 350,000 to $1 million. Okay. So why does that concern me? Okay. It concerns me because what does that mean? That means I can go on this website. I can figure out what this company's payroll is by reverse engineering 2.5 times of that. And then based on that, I can figure out their revenue. Okay. I can figure out pretty much how many subs they're using. Okay. So if I'm a competitor, I'm going to be looking at this, and that information is going to be easily accessible and easily data mined. Okay. And that's something that nobody really anticipated, that it would be put like that. Now, they do put it in a bracket. So 150 to 350, you still got a little bit of a guessing game, but you know, that's something I think a lot of people didn't anticipate. Now, keep in mind, this came out, the SBA, I think, announced this via a tweet. So will this actually come to fruition? I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in government technology, so I don't know if it will come or won't come, but that's what they said they're going to do. So very interesting. A lot of public data information is going to be available. That remember when this came out, you and I were talking, right? And I said the government never gives something for nothing, right? There's always some strings attached. This is a great example of a string being attached, right? I don't think a lot of people thought that all their information, a lot of this demographic type information would be easily available for public consumption.
Right. I think that level of public scrutiny certainly was not something a lot of the firms you probably work with anticipated
Right.
by going forward with those loans. Does the disclosure you're talking about, does that also talk about the payment back? You know, will there be a way for people to track where companies are on that level?
Right now, no. Right now, no. Basically, it's very basic demographic info. Okay, but it did say it will have you in a bracket. It did say it will have your North American job code, whatever that is. It will have your business name and your address and the number of jobs supported. Okay, so somebody that's clever, you see what I'm saying, right? Somebody that's clever can go in, reverse engineer it, figure out what your payroll is, and then extrapolate what your revenue is. That's something I think a lot of people hadn't really anticipated. And I don't know how, again, will it come to fruition? Don't know, but they've said it will. So anytime they say something, that causes me concern.
Got it. We're on the eve of the first virtual Western Roofing Expo. You're presenting with other members of your team. What are you looking forward to again from that standpoint this week?
So we got two great seminars that we're doing this week. We've got 4 or 5 total that we're doing, and the 2 that we're doing this week tomorrow, Ben Briggs and I are speaking on the top 5 employment issues. And Ben's fantastic speaker, great guy. Basically I'm just there to carry his briefcase. So I'm looking forward to that one. And then on Thursday, I think I'm talking about critical contract provisions. And the one thing that I want to tell everybody that's listening out there is that you're going to get the bang for your buck if you attend these seminars. Okay. For example, on the contracts one, I give you the contract provisions. Okay. I serve it up for you. Right. And I'm also going to announce some special stuff that I'm doing for members only at the beginning of these seminars. So tune in.
All right. Excellent. So Trent, we are headed into a holiday break, or what's traditionally kind of a holiday break for vacations and whatnot, and celebrations. Things are obviously very different this year, but did you want to share any thoughts with our audience of contractors?
Yeah, I would say enjoy this weekend. We all need a break. Spend time with your family, get outdoors. Obviously stay safe, but you got to blow off some steam. And this is a pressure cooker situation, so I am going to enjoy the opportunity to spend some time with my family, and I'm looking forward to we're actually closed Friday, which is a rarity. I had somebody that wanted to meet with me on Friday, and I just about scheduled it, and then Anita, who is so great, reminded me we've got that day off. I was like, you know what, you're right. So that's what I would say is just enjoy it, blow off some steam, but stay safe.
Got it. And, I'd like to say, obviously, our country has its challenges. We do feel very divided right now, but at the end of the day, we do live in the best place on earth. I do firmly believe that. And this Independence Day weekend, I'll be thinking about, everyone that have brought us to this point. So, and that does include a lot of the independent, roofing contractors and business owners out there. So, I just want to say thanks and stay safe, and let's forge a path ahead together. Jill, I'll throw it to you.
Yes, I totally agree, Art. We live in a great place, that's for sure. Trent, as always, thank you so much for your time today. If people need to reach you, again, I guess it's right there on your screen. But Trent, can you tell us how to get a hold of you?
Sure. CottneyCL.com is our website, or feel free to just email me direct at tcottney@cottneycl.com.
Very great. So yes, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you need to reach anybody at roofing contractor or walls and ceilings or building enclosure, and it's roofingcontractor.com or wconline.com, and just click the contact us page. But while you're there, make sure you sign up for free for our e-newsletters, our digital edition. And everybody, please stay safe and healthy. And we look forward to talking to you again next time, especially with Trent. Thank you again, Trent.
Thank you.